Tower People's Choice Top 100 Games of All Time. Dice Tower People's Choice Top 100 Games of All Time.
Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo! We're in the top 5 games of all time that are your choices. Or at least 1,000 of you came in and voted. We added them together. And I'll tell you, as we went through, and I had to go through and manually look at the list because some people didn't type things, and we put it all together and such. But there were some games that at the very beginning I saw were going to rise to the top. Number 1 was a massive winner. Number 2 and 3 were very high. 4 and 5, I mean, then we saw a drop, and then there was much closer variation between the rest. But these 5 were the 5. Are you ready to see what your top 5 games are? And if you didn't vote or anything, you can still look at these, and I'm telling you, while these 5 may not have made my top 100 or not, you'll see in a minute if they did, but at the same time, a lot of people really like these games. A lot of people. So if you get any of these games, you have a good chance of enjoying them. Enough drivel for me, let's get to the games.
Number 5,
Oh, it's so fashionable these days to say Settlers of Catan. You know, when you first get into Euro games, it's so easy to like Settlers of Catan. But, you know, when you play these other games, you realize that it's based so much on luck, and it's shut up. You know, of all these Euro games, this whole genre out there that I call Euro games, Settlers doesn't even really fit that category. It's like in its own breed. In fact, very few games other than maybe Carcassonne and Ticket to Ride have even come close to duplicating the popularity that Settlers of Catan has had. There are deluxe versions. There's like 247 million different scenarios out there. Literally, there's just so much out there. There's a card game. It's basically allowed a whole subset of games to come out of it. There's the Catan series. There's space version. There's so much. And all this comes down from one simple fact: trading with other people. I get a game, I trade it with other people. And I get resources, I trade them with other people. How are the resources generated? By rolling the dice. When does that happen? On everybody's turn. When can I play? On everybody's turn. And those fascinating little things make this such a great game. And I'm pleased to see that it made it so high on the list. With so many other new hot games out there, Settlers is still here, sitting at number 5. Good for you, Mr. Toiber.
Number 4, 7 Wonders.
However, speaking of new hot games, here's one that just came out a little over a year ago and is just sweeping in popularity. I did not think it would be as popular as it was, and I certainly don't think that it should be as high as it is here, but I cannot deny how much people like it. 7 Wonders is a game I think people enjoy for several reasons. One, it's very simple. Take a card, keep it, pass. Take a card, keep it, pass. And that's it. And the fact that a pile of people, up to 7, can play it, and it can be strategic, and there's already 1 expansion, the leader's out, and more on the way. And like I said, I kind of struggle to see why people enjoy it as much as they do, but people really get a kick out of it. And you know what? I'll sit down and play it with you. And I have it in my shelf because it's a game that people enjoy and like playing. And the idea of building a civilization in a card game, it's not a civilization building game, but it sure comes pretty stinking close to one. And so you got to give credit to where credit is due. 7 Wonders, we salute you at number 4.
Number 3, Power
Grid.
Power Grid.
There are a lot of people out there who likely think Power Grid is being robbed, being at number 3. But it is not being robbed, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great game. And and I wouldn't think so. Because it looks boring, sounds boring. When you explain the rules, seems boring. But when you play, you find out, wow. And you know, a lot of games I talk about and I say they're really best with 2 or 3 players. Power Grid works really well with 3, 4, 5, 6 players. It's kind of long with 6, but I mean, it still works really well. And it's because it has neat auctions. It has a really fascinating resource buying phase. And turn order is more important in Power Grid, I dare say, than almost any other game in existence. Money, as a tiebreaker, is more critical than almost any other game in existence. And there's tons of different maps for it. For me, Power Grid is the kind of game that I look at that's a deep, heavy economic game where I like to see variations. Thus, it's neat to see all these maps. I don't need to own them all because the variations aren't that interesting to me to spend the money to buy all these expansions. But I do own a few of them, and it's nice to go back and forth. I especially like the Korea map. Of course, that's where I lived for a while. But Power Grid is a deep economical game that doesn't seem that bad when you first play it. But it can get very, very intriguing, especially the end game. Auctions and placement are some of the most tense moments in any game that I've experienced, and obviously a lot of other people think so, thus making it number 3.
Number 2, Agricula.
10 years ago, if I told you that the second most popular board game on your list was a game about farming, you would have not believed me. And Agricola came out and took the board gaming world by storm. Now, interestingly enough, it's not the kind of game that everybody and anyone will play, like Ticket to Ride and Seven Wonders were. But in it, because there is much more. There is a family version of it, but what fascinates people about Agricola are these occupation cards, these other cards, improvement cards that you can build, and there's tons of them in the base game, and then the unnecessary expansions, really, you don't need those more cards. But in the base game, there's so many different things going on that you can play the same game over and over again. It's tight. It's tough. Your people are always starving. But it really feels like you're building a cute little farm with sheep and pigs and cattle and growing and having babies and building fences and stables and sowing and harvesting. And it really, because I mean, this is a heavier style game, but the theme makes it simple enough that it's really easy for me to teach this game to people. People's like, I don't know what's going on, but I think I'll plant some grain and plant some vegetables here because that makes sense to do. And in the game sense, it makes sense to do there also. So, Agricola, often ranked number 1 in many spots on the internet. Here, pretty high, ranked number 2, but dwarfed by
Number 1, Dominion.
The juggernaut of all of them, with over double the votes of everything else, is Dominion. Now, I'm not surprised that Dominion won. I am surprised at by how far it won and how it just beat down the competition. So either that means the Dice Tower fans just, their common united goal is Dominion, or it's the fact that in other rankings across the internet, Dominion's only brought down because some people go out there and bitterly hate on it, and that didn't happen in this poll. Dominion is a deck building game where you build your deck as the game progresses. You have 10 different cards, or I guess 16 or 17 different cards that you can buy and build your deck from each game. And each game, they're different. There's endless variations of different games that you can play. And you adjust it, you see what other people do. You can play very interactively with cards. You can play where there's no interaction at all. You can, there's expansions that do all kinds of things, to future turns, to dual use cards. But it's such a groundbreaking concept that other games, Thunderstone, Arctic Scavengers, Heroes of Graxia, there's a lot. There's a lot out there that owe it to Dominion. And there's people out there say, oh, it's just like Magic the Gathering and stuff. No, because Magic the Gathering would never have appealed to my wife and never appealed to other people, but Dominion does. Dominion appeals to Magic the Gathering players and appeals to your common person, and is probably the heaviest game that I've had great success with. I'll bring it out and I'm like, oh man. And I'll say, no, look, just +1 action, +1 coin, that's easy. And people play it and they're like, that was pretty cool, let's try it again. Ha 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 ha! Gotcha, sucker. And Dominion's great at that. Fantastic game. I know there's people out there who do not like it, but most of you did. And so that's number 1, Dominion. Woo! That was a lot of work. That was a lot of games, 100 games. But you know what, we'll probably do it again next year. We'll see how it changes from year to year. I'm looking forward to that. Well, that's it. You can check out my top 100 list, and I have a lot of thanks I'd like to say to lots of different people, and y'all especially. Check out my number 1 through 5 on my list for that. And you can also check out Melody's too. Until next time, though, I'm Tom Vassell, and you've been watching The Dice Tower with your picks.
Dear, dear.